Well, my final question is on crime. And we've seen these stats that every type of violent crime in the U.S. is dropping dramatically. They went up under Trump, and they've come down. Every type of crime, with the exception of car crime, has come down. It's really quite remarkable. And I know, obviously, crime was a big issue in your home state. That's why we're stuck with Ron Johnson for 6 more years, because he was able to beat Mandela Barnes on that issue. So should the Democrats run with this issue, or do you think it's too late, or what's your feeling on all this?
Well, I think they need to take it more seriously, because I think this is another one of these whiteboard issues where they will cite the statistics, but there is a sense that things are spinning out of control in some of the cities. And so this is something that Democrats like Rui Teixeira have been saying, like, look, it is crucial that you not appear to be soft. Now, one of the really interesting political developments has been the backlash in very, very red and very, very blue states against progressive prosecutors. I mean, we saw, a very left-wing DA who was actually recalled in San Francisco. So there is a real pushback against some of these more progressive policies. So this is something that I think Joe Biden may need to have a sister soldier type moment. But since you've raised the issue of crime, and we're this far into this discussion about 2024, the most prominent potential criminal in America may be Donald Trump, who is sitting in a criminal courthouse in New York this week and still faces 88 felony charges. So again, as part of the weirdness of 2024 is Republicans assume they can run on crime. Democrats also assume they can run on crime, particularly if the Republican nominee is a convicted criminal.
Carrie?
I want to ask you about this, because I've looked at a lot of polling around the Trump charges, and you had obviously in the primary where Trump's approval rating shot up. It was really interesting because DeSantis was gaining ground and had a lot of momentum last spring, and then the charges started, and then it was like DeSantis just started dropping. And I think, but what was interesting in what I've seen is that Democrats and independents also, all three parties or ideologies, independent, Republican, and Democrat, all three of them believe that these prosecutions are politically motivated. The Democrats just happen to like it. And so it actually motivates them also. And independents believe it as well. A majority of independents believe that the prosecutions are politically motivated. So given that background, do you think that's part of why it's just become sort of white noise for a lot of voters, that they think, well, this is just baked into the cake. He's just kind of a drama queen. I accept that, but I care a lot more about inflation and immigration, and my mortgage is now almost double the monthly payments versus what it would have been before Joe Biden took office if I had bought a house then. Do you think that it's just become sort of normalized?
There's the danger of it becoming normalized, but I think it's whistling past the graveyard to suggest that these trials are not going to have an effect. I mean, since you're talking about polls, and, I think at a certain point we do need to talk about the rule of law rather than the horse race stuff. Donald Trump Donald Trump is a man that conspired to overturn a free and fair election, who incited an attack on the Capitol, who has absconded and stolen government documents, violated the Espionage Act. Now he's on trial in New York for his many, many frauds. Now, this may not, move any Republican votes, but it's hard for me to imagine that after these trials, after the evidence, after the potential convictions, that there are very, very many voters who did not vote for Donald Trump 4 years ago who are saying, now I think we're going to vote for him. I mean, I do think that there is that moment where you step back and you think, does this add any votes, or will it override many of the other things? Now, I actually think that there is a subset of swing voters, and since you're talking about polls a lot, that show that if he is in fact convicted, that it will affect their votes, as it ought to, because again, until Donald Trump came along, I don't know that any Republican would have argued that, yes, they would vote for a convicted felon for governor, for legislature, for mayor, or for any position of public trust. This is another one of these just examples of how Republicans have completely transformed themselves into these cult members that look at Donald Trump and go, okay, so back in 2016, we decided the character didn't matter. In 2024, we're deciding that insurrection and criminal conspiracy and fraud don't matter. Where does this end? And does anyone really think that this won't have a negative effect on Donald Trump in November? I think that's incredibly naive.
Well, I think it's a lot. I mean, I think when you look at the charges as far as like with Trump and the documents, the Republicans say, well, Biden did the same thing. The circumstances were very similar. The difference was that they raided his home and they didn't raid Joe Biden's home.
And you just know, that's not true.
Come on, it's such a false equivalency.
I mean, we can do the spin, but even Bill Barr, who is supporting Donald Trump, said no, these are not the same things. It's when the federal government says you have taken these documents, you need to give them back. Here's a subpoena. You refuse the subpoena, and then you obstruct justice. That's the heart of this case. And again, how it plays out politically, I don't know, but they're just not comparable. And we could argue about this all day, but Donald Trump knowingly, willingly defied a government subpoena. That's why they raided the house. He used his Confederates to try to cover this up. And if there's ever a trial, that will come out. Now, I don't know whether there's going to be a trial, though.
And what worries me is that there'll be a mistrial. It just takes one juror, right? And then, of course, in the New York trial, and that could be a win for Trump, unfortunately. But I wanted to end the show kind of with something fun, and that is I love what ifs. And so one of the great questions of presidential elections is will there be a so-called October surprise? And so I guess I wanted to ask you both if you could pick an October surprise that you would love to have happen this year, what would it be? What would it be for you, Charlie?
Well, first of all, I think there's going to probably be a surprise every single month before. There's going to be a September surprise, an August surprise, a November surprise. And the word love is doing a lot of work there. What I am hoping is that the rule of law actually steps up, that the criminal justice system actually does something that the rest of our institutions have failed to do and holds Donald Trump accountable. And the American people say, you know what, we may not be happy about inflation or the border or about spending of these other issues, but we are not going to put a criminal, a chronic liar like Donald Trump back into the White House. So that would be, I guess, a mildly pleasant surprise.
Carrie?
October surprises? I mean, all the polls say that the Americans want somebody different. They don't want Biden or they don't want Trump. Like this rematch is pretty much the worst scenario for the majority of Americans, and yet it's what we're getting.
Yep.
So I wish we had a pleasantly surprising scenario where we had different candidates for us to choose from, but I don't see that happening. I mean, people have said, oh, at the last minute, Joe Biden, he'll drop off the ticket and there'll be a switcheroo right after the convention or something like that.
Nope.
I don't see him doing that. I don't see Jill Biden signing up for that, but who knows?
Well, mine would be one of the great mysteries to me is still what happened to all those text messages after January 6th, which still haven't shown up. So I'm hoping that someone is holding on to those and they're going to be released September, October, or at some point, because they have to exist somewhere. And it is just a great mystery that they never came to light. And I think they could be very damning, and they could bring January 6th back into people's main vision, whereas I think it's kind of faded out a little bit. But, well, on that note, we're going to have to wrap up the show. But, Charlie, it's been so great having you. I hope you'll come back. I hope you're enjoying, I guess you call it quasi-retirement. Or
I'm spending more time with the dogs.
Good. Well, that's great. Well, and again, thanks to all of you for joining us on Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. Thanks so much for having us, Charlie. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.